Hello, everybody. This is Bunker Dunker coming at you loud and proud from the interwebs that we're all plugged into. I've recently sat down and just absorbed some of the comments about Lightyear, the film. And I think it's hilarious that people have talked about the woke, go broke situation, or just the fact that a Pixar film, now, never mind that it's a Disney film, but a Pixar film that we all quote-unquote collectively grew up on from a film series known as Toystory, all of a sudden could barely edge its way into the market for people to see. Was it due to Top Gun Maverick, the S-Chow influence, or the Crocs banning it? I would argue that it's less than any of that. It's actually just the gloss on really what made Lightyear fail. And what it really is that made that film fail, and why everybody became so inflammatory and trying to start drama just to get some kind of attention on the film, was because the film was dead on arrival. As soon as you started seeing any advertisements for it, it was DOA. And the reason why it was DOA is because it's not a Toy Story film. It's not anything, because Buzz Lightyear is a toy that we grew up with, and we as in the people who saw Toy Story 1, 2, 3, maybe just 3 or 2. Nevertheless, you've seen those films, but it's not Buzz Lightyear the character, or the actor, the person, the kind of cartoon show that you'd watch on Saturday morning television or during the week after school. That person didn't exist. It never existed. It was never an entity. So Buzz Lightyear that we grew up with was a completely different thing. It's like, think of it like Toy Story 2, in the situation where Buzz Lightyear ends up going to Al's Toy Barn, and then he comes across all these other Buzz Lightyears, but we only get to see the interaction between him and one other one, and one's got a belt on, right? And he acts like how Buzz acted like in the first film, where it's this kind of monologue, these statements, this bark, this fluff piece of background that doesn't actually give it character, other than just sitting here saying, oh yeah, he's a sci-fi space ranger. You know, he's a guy who goes out there and fights the evil Emperor Zurg to uncharted space for a secret mission. He's got kung fu action. He's got a belt that defies gravity. He's got wings that take him high like a jetpack. All of these things, the Buzz Lightyear with a belt and the original Buzz Lightyear when he was first coming out of his box, thought these things were real. They were in a fantasy world. And that is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a fantasy, a joke, just this little cover to give the character some kind of background when they're first introduced, because they can't be children. They've got to have some kind of personality, some kind of preset to be introduced into the story and go somewhere. And as you see in the Toy Story universe, these characters, as they interact with the universe itself, the world that is created, they change. For Buzz Lightyear, Andy's Buzz Lightyear that we grew up with, he becomes a toy. He embraces that identity. He learns that, yes, I am a toy, but I can decide that I'm actually better off as this toy than I would be living in a fantasy world thinking that I've got the abilities to fly as a space ranger. I can interact with these people, these other toys are my friends. We can grow and be something. And then we have the Buzz Lightyear with a belt, that we see. He becomes the son to the Emperor Zurg, who originally thought he was the Emperor Zurg, and somehow his gun was able to shoot real plasma, and in reality it shoots plastic balls that just bounce off things. And, when he fell down the elevator, cracked his tooth, again, he ends up having a father-son relationship with that Buzz Lightyear. So it gives a uniqueness and character and development to these guys that have nothing to do with Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. Again, this character we never see, we never know of, and that is just fluff. And now you're making a movie about the character of Buzz Lightyear that nobody actually is attached to. Because, again, we're attached to Buzz, the toy. and Toy Story, the universe of Toy Story. So this effectively is a film that sits outside of the franchise of Toy Story. So you can't just pull off the nostalgia of Buzz Lightyear, the toy. You have to create a universe now. They realized this when they created the first iteration of Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. When it came out on VHS, they had the Toy Story gang pick it up as a physical VHS and put it in to a VHS player and watched it on a television. And this was because the Toy Story universe was supposed to be grounded in our world, and that they would be interested in watching what we are going to watch, which was Buzz Lightyear of Star Command on a VHS tape. It's much like when you see the character Rex playing as Buzz Lightyear in the first beginnings of Toy Story 2, where you have him flying down to a planet with a belt, hitting the ground and going through this secret base and whatnot, and eventually facing off against Zurg and being annihilated. We get that redone again later on in the film, where it goes from the fantasy to reality. So here we have, again, their reality of Toy Story going into the fantasy. So you have that interconnectedness, but you have the strict limitations of both worlds. So when they created the Buzz Lightyear Star Command TV show, and they had that whole series that went out, it felt like something that you would watch, obviously, as a cartoon, because that's how it was made, as a cartoon that kids would watch and buy toys from. By contrast, Lightyear is a more gritty, realistic, and quote-unquote serious film that you wouldn't necessarily buy toys from. It would seem that it's trying to be a cerebral kind of film, where it's trying to bring in those who grew up with Toy Story and sell them the idea that, hey, you remember Buzz Lightyear, we've got his tail right here. And just like how you've grown up, we've grown up, we're going to make it grittier, we're going to make it industrial, and we're going to give the plot a cerebral feeling, this underlying tone of what science fiction was always supposed to be about. So you look at the uniform designs, you look at the guns, you look at the ships, and you look at the robots with that touch of Wall-E design, and you see it. You see that realism, that maturity that the movie itself wants to go for. And then you see the schizophrenia that they started having when designing some of these things and thinking back like, oh, well, we've got to make it more like the toy. And this is where they get into that nostalgia baiting situation, where you have, later on with Buzz Lightyear getting into one of these suits, you have this silly design that the toy had, which was 2 big buttons on the side for the helmet, and then you have this giant red button on the left side of your chest, and then you've got these 3 other buttons on the right side of your chest. Then you've got these 2 purple straps that are underneath your chest, going in from the back to the front. Then you've got these purple dots on your fingers, and you're wearing a diving cap over your head that's purple. None of this works with the realism that they go for in the first half of the film, where you have this kind of NASA design where he's an astronaut, where we first are introduced to him, he's got fatigues on that are more military-esque or NASA-orientated kind of fatigues. Then he gets into a astronaut suit where it's orange with steel with a small chest plate, and he's got a little thing on his arm. That makes sense and works with the natural tone and image that you see in this movie. But they had to put in that nostalgia bait and ruin it. And then we get to the other part that really is strange about this film. Because if you're going to take and make it so it's like the toys and like the Toy Story, you want to add more colorful characters. But we never see like the little green men, for instance. We don't see any notice of them at all. Or any other aliens besides the tentacle monster. Some people thought Zurg was an alien. And he probably was in the original write-out of what Buzz Lightyear was. However, in this, he's Buzz Lightyear, which is pretty funny Because in the Toystory movies, we know that Zurg is his father, which is an obvious throwaway line to Star Wars. And the whole reason why that was written in is just for that reference, so that you could have that kind of pop culture reference. So now it's that Zurg is not his father, nor his enemy, it's him. It's him from the future, and he's fighting his future self. This is where the cerebral aspect of the story really shines, and that is that they're trying to get across a moral message and a commentary that sci-fi writers normally had, especially in the beginning, like a lot of the Victorian era, kind of like George Orwell or Mary Shelley with her Frankenstein series. It's supposed to have some kind of moral in the background that you build around and you're trying to push for people to understand. And for Buzz Lightyear, or in this case just Lightyear, it's the idea, obviously, that obsession is bad, and eventually being cold, spurning others, and being obsessed with this one technology will inevitably leave you cold, alone, and evil, which naturally created Zurg. Not the evil Emperor Zurg, mind you, because Zurg in this is just a guy in a suit fighting himself from the past. And inevitably, it falls on its face, because we don't get that kind of vibe from Buzz throughout the film. We don't get that kind of build-up, we don't get that kind of investiture, and we don't get that vibe that Buzz Lightyear could become Zurg. It's not like Luke Skywalker becoming Darth Vader, where we have that moment on Dagobah with Yoda. We have nothing of that with Buzz. The only thing we really have with Buzz is kind of parts where he's shunning some of his teammates and he's just selfishly focused, but that doesn't transpire into something like a Darth Vader, something like a Zurg in this case, or as we used to know him, Emperor Zurg, but we have Zurg as the older Buzz Lightyear. So the obvious question is, and I'm sure many people are thinking about it who have watched the film, is that, well, Zurg is actually out there and Buzz found this ship and all this technology, all these robots, blah, 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 blah. I think it's just a convenient thing for people to put that in there. It's all too much contrivancy for it. Not only because Zurg didn't have to be in this film. They could have focused on the tentacles and the planet itself and the insects being the issue, and then them actually reaching the faster than light system, being able to actually go get off the planet, etc., etc. Yet they felt they needed Zurg, and they needed to have that set up, and left themselves in a precarious position where they will undercut either the first film or the second film, depending on what they decide to do with Zurg. And I don't even think that they're going to be able to create another film. They very well might, just because somebody already greenlit it in the back room and said, yeah, sure, do it. You know, maybe this one will do better. Or they already have this all pre-planned and this is how it was going to go. We're going to have a trilogy or some other thing like Star Wars. I wouldn't be surprised if they would try to do that kind of stuff. But based on what happened with this film and how bad it got sandbagged as well, I just don't see it going anywhere. But I still want to hear from the rest of you. What do you think? Like, comment, and subscribe. And particularly, tell me, what do you think it was all about? What do you think the bigger picture of Lightyear was? And until then, I'll leave you a spot by the fire. And I'll wish you peace through and with you. Until we meet again.